Hello, Ground Passers, and welcome back to another episode of Ground Pass. This is your every other week mini pod, and we're here to cover just two topics: the cousin final in Shanghai and the all-American Wuhan final between Jessica Pagula and Coco Gauff. This had to be the best weekend in tennis ever. So sit back, relax, and let me explain why. Let's start with the all-American final in Wuhan. The final was between Coco Gauff and Jessica Pagula. Let's start with Coco Gauff's run to the final. She was coming from a loss in the semifinals against Amanda Anastasia at the China Open in Beijing. It was a pretty devastating loss. Amanda Anastasia absolutely crushed in that semifinal match. And Coco Gauff was the defending champion in the China Open, so she didn't defend her points there. So coming into Wuhan, it wasn't exactly coming in on a high note, but she started off great. Her serve was working, her forehand was working, and she just came into the tournament with a bit of confidence. So you might say maybe that match against Amanda Anastasia helped the situation. Coco Gauff's technique is always under scrutiny. Is the forehand firing? Is the serve working? Are there too many double faults? There's always questions behind her technique and also behind what she's doing to help improve those techniques. She had a coach who was helping her with her grip. And then during the US Open, she hired Gavin McMillan, who is someone who we will talk about in the future. I know I've said this numerous times, but there is a match stories in the works where we'll talk about her new serving coach, Gavin McMillan. He wasn't with her at the China Open or here in Wuhan, but he is still helping her behind the scenes. She even talked about him during the award ceremony of this tournament. Her opponents in the first few rounds were not that very challenging, but when it came to the quarterfinals, she had a rematch against Laura Siegemund. Now, we already know Laura Siegemund is a very tricky opponent. We've talked about her a few times on this podcast, but you might remember way back to 2023 US Open. The US Open that Coco Gauff won, one of her early round matches was against Laura Siegemund, and it was one of the most contentious matches that Coco Gauff had during that run to the US Open win. But in this rematch against Laura Siegemund, there was no fuss in this match. It was a straight set victory. There was no hiccup, no drama. And really, this is the best I have seen Coco Gauff look since the clay season and since her win at Roland Garros. Her next opponent in the semifinal was Jasmine Paolini. Now, Jasmine Paolini, just before this match against Coco Gauff, had beaten Iga Swiatek in the match of the tournament. It's the first time since she had ever won a match against Iga Swiatek, and she went into God mode to win this match against Iga Swiatek. I remember waking up in the morning and watching this match. It was on a Friday, and boy, was it a match to give you motivation on a Friday. It was just, she had a plan. She executed the plan to perfection and won the match in straight sets. She said in press later on that she had that same plan against Iga in the finals during Cincinnati. She just wasn't able to execute it perfectly, and she just came back with the exact same plan, but this time she executed. So coming into this match with Coco Gauff, we're all thinking, if that Jasmine Paolini shows up against Coco Gauff, who she had a record of 3 love this year alone, Coco did not have a chance. Jasmine has just had Coco's number this year. She had beaten her 3 times already on clay and hard courts. So it was hard to see her losing to Coco, especially after her win against Iga in the previous match. But Coco had other ideas. It's funny how Coco Gauff is so online. I think she's one of the most online players there is. And she won this match. She won in straight sets against Jasmine Paolini. And I remember listening to the on-court interview afterwards, and the on-court interviewer asked Coco Gauff, and she said, hey, people have been talking about the fact that you are 3-0 against Jasmine Paolini, and how do you feel about finally getting this win? And Coco Gauff immediately, without missing a beat, was like, we're 3-0 this year. We're actually tied now in our, career span of matches. So they're actually 3-3 in their career of head-to-head matches. So that was really fun. But you just know she's been like seeing the headlines online, and was, looking forward to correct the record on that, and her head-to-head against Jasmine Paolini. So again, Coco Gauff just literally breezed through this draw and got to the final of Wuhan. On the other side of the draw was Jessica Pagula, who had a completely different run to the final of this tournament. Her first match, because she got a bye in the first round, so her second round match in all technicality was against Hailey Baptiste. Now, you might remember Hailey Baptiste is one of the players that we are following through the Asian swing. We interviewed her for our On Tour series, which is on Substack. I will leave a link in the description of this video. Please check it out. It's been a fun series on our Substack. It is free to subscribe to and read. But of course, if you feel the need to contribute to our Substack, go right ahead. But yeah, she played this match against Hailey Baptiste that she almost lost. She had to battle it to a third set, battle through, and she came through the match and won the match against Hailey Baptiste. Hailey actually played very well in that match and could have totally taken that out of the hands of Jessica Pagula. But that was just one of the 4 3-set matches that Jessica Pagula had to play to get to the finals of the Wuhan 1000 level event. She just couldn't play a 2-set match. She kept talking about it. She just said, I keep playing these 3-set matches. But it spoke to her grit and resilience and just determination to win. And, I loved how she also credited her physio during the finalist speech during the award ceremony, where she talked about how, her physio just kept her body together, because she also played in the China Open and got to the semifinals. So she just had a lot of matches on her body, and she still said she felt really, really good. What I do want to talk about, though, is her semifinal match against Aryna Sabalenka to get to the final of the Wuhan Open. Now, Aryna Sabalenka is the queen of Wuhan. She had taken some time off. She did not participate in the China Open. She had a minor injury coming out of the US Open and decided not to play the China Open. She was in Greece, gallivanting around, and her social media, just go follow her social media. She seemed to have had the time of her life in Greece. But yeah, she comes into Wuhan. Aryna Sabalenka has not lost in Wuhan since 2018. Now, there was a chunk of time there in the middle. We all know why, that the Wuhan tournament did not happen. But she just hasn't lost in Wuhan, and she's been the queen of Wuhan. So she's just not expected to lose there. It's her court. She's the queen of Wuhan. And I think a very underrated rivalry that we don't really talk about a lot is the rivalry between Aryna Sabalenka and Jessica Pagula. The last time Jessica Pagula won a match against Aryna Sabalenka was 2023. Otherwise, Aryna Sabalenka has dominated that matchup. But every single time they meet up, it is a battle. It's never straightforward. It is a grind. And even when they just met at the US Open recently, it was a grind. They met previously in 2024 at the finals. That was a grind also. So coming into this, you expected it to be a battle. I think everyone expected Aryna Sabalenka to come through that battle, but who came through that battle? Jessica Pagula. She learned a lot from the US Open semifinal that she lost to Aryna Sabalenka, that she lost a very, very close semifinal against her in this past US Open. In fact, I think the statistics said she won more points than Aryna Sabalenka and still lost the match. And that's just sort of the craziness of the point system in tennis. But yeah, she learned a lot. I'm going to leave a link to a clip of what she said in press during after the match against Aryna Sabalenka, because Jessica Pagula is someone who, in press especially, she never really just gives a one-word answer like, I did well, yes, no. She really did break down her strategy when it comes to playing Aryna Sabalenka, especially here in Wuhan. And it was really nice to just read. And, I don't think she was giving away big secrets, but it also was actually very in-depth as well. So I will leave a link to that if you want to check it out. So that brings us to the final. And I think coming into the final, I think two things were working here, where Jessica Pagula was maybe a little bit gassed at this point, but at the same time, Coco Gauff had a plan. She knew exactly what she wanted to do in order to beat Jessica Pagula. And almost just like Jasmine Paolini did against Iga, she executed it, and she did it in straight sets, and she won. She said during the acceptance speech, she was like, she knew she could not let Jess get to a third set because that was just her MO. This tournament was taking things to a third set and then winning them. So she knew that was not going to be what she was going to let happen in this final. So Coco Gauff, winner in Wuhan. Last year, she won, the China Open. This year, she wins Wuhan. And guess what? She's defended her points from last year. Last year, she won the China Open and lost in Wuhan in the semifinals. This year, she lost in the semifinals of the China Open and wins in Wuhan. And she's defended her points. It's really interesting when we talk about Coco Gauff and her sort of technical problems with her game. And, I think there's this sort of almost outsized expectation, and she should be doing, quote unquote, better. And yet, when you look at her season as a whole, she defended her points. She's still top 3 in the world, and she won a Grand Slam. And yet when you hear the rhetoric online, it's almost like she didn't do any of those things. And I wanted to bring this up because I posted it online, and I do understand that a lot of people who do follow Ground Pass, because it is what we do, we have a lot of people who are new to the sport. And in general, I think tennis has a lot of new people following the sport. So we have a lot of new casual fans to the sport, which is great. Welcome. Hi, please like and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. It's greatly appreciated. And if you're listening to this on a podcast player of your choice, it'd be nice if you give us a rating if you're enjoying listening to us. It really does help with people discovering the podcast. But I think I used a term throughout this tournament in Wuhan in describing Coco Gauff's game, which is winning ugly. And I think a lot of people took that literally. I got a lot of replies on social media of people being like, she doesn't have an ugly game. Her game is anything but ugly, which I get it. I understand with people taking the wording literally, but I was using it in the way her former coach, who is Brad Gilbert, he wrote the book called Winning Ugly. That's exactly the title of the book. I will leave a link to the book in the description of this podcast. But I'm going to read this because I wrote it all down and I don't want to misquote myself or anything. But the idea of winning ugly is the strategy of finding any possible way to win, not by relying solely on perfect technique or flashy shot making, but by thinking smarter, playing to your strengths, disrupting your opponent's rhythm, and capitalizing on their weaknesses. even in less than ideal conditions. Anyone remember the French Open Roland Garros windy final? It has to do with mental toughness and adaptability, disrupting and variation, patience in point-by-point focus, observation, and analysis. This is the idea of winning ugly. It doesn't have to do with perfect technique, perfect forehand technique, backhand technique, perfect serve. It has to do with working with what you have and using that against your opponent. That's what winning ugly is. And I think, at least in my generation, no player has used the strategy of winning ugly as well. And when I say my generation, let's not talk about how old I am, so let's not do that. But I want to say in this current generation of players, I don't think anyone has used the strategy of winning ugly as well as Coco Gauff has. And that's why in my post I said, if anyone should trademark, that is Coco Gauff. So yeah, that's where that was coming from. But again, I got, the typical response of people who are taking it literally. But if you want to delve deeper into what winning ugly means, I do highly recommend just read the book. It's actually a really, really great book of something where, and I like books like this too, where you don't only have to use it in tennis, you can also take it into your life and use that as well. But yeah, I think she is someone who, despite her technical flaws, still is a 2-time Grand Slam champion. And by the way, with this win in Wuhan, is 9-0 in hard court wins. In her very first 9 hard court finals, she's won all of them. Coco Gauff. So she's still going to work on those technicalities. That is why she has hired Gavin McMillan to help her with those technicalities. I think she talked about it in the US Open, that she is willing to sacrifice some winning in order to, in the long term, be better. And can you imagine if she's this good already and then she fixes those technicalities, how much better she could be? I do think that is food for thought. And finally, just before I move on to the second topic of the day, All-American women's final. The American women are doing great. We had 2 Grand Slam winners in Coco Gauff and Maddie Keys, and we had 2 finalist positions. Both were Amanda Anisimova. She was the finalist in Wimbledon and the US Open. But the American women are really crushing it this year, and it's really great to see. Right now, I think, so we have Madison Keys, Jessica Pagula, Amanda Anisimova, Coco Gauff. So that's 4 who have all qualified in singles for the year-end finals. That is a big deal. There are only 8 players in the year-end finals, and 4 of them, half of the field are American. That's a really big deal for the American women and American female tennis, American tennis in general. So guys, step it up. See the girls, they're doing really good. It's time for the guys to step it up and get on to their level. Next, the best story in tennis this year, I would say. I mean, let's argue in the comments. Okay, don't argue in the comments. Let's not argue in the comments. But let me know. Is the cousin final the best story in tennis this year? I would argue very gently that it is. But the Shanghai story, the Shanghai Master story, the cousin final, for me, is just the best story that has happened in tennis this season. If you don't know what I'm talking about, the Shanghai Masters happened this past week. It was parallel with the Wuhan Open, which the women were also, so that was what was happening on the women's side. On the men's side, they also had a 1,000 level event, which was the Shanghai Open. And the final was between Arthur Rinderknech and Valentin Vacherot, cousins, one from Monaco and one from France. And you might be thinking, who now? Who are these people? I mean, I think we all know who Arthur Rinderknech is, and maybe not the wider, scope of casual fans know who Arthur Rinderknech is, but Arthur Rinderknech we might all know from back in 2024 Wimbledon when he had a match against Taylor Fritz and Taylor Fritz won, and then at the net he goes, "Have a nice flight home," which was a reference to some tension that they had during Roland Garros, the French Open in 2023. So Arthur Rinderknech and Taylor Fritz, they've had their clashes. I think it's probably done at this point, but they've definitely had their moments, and I think that is what Arthur Rinderknech is known most for. But so coming into this Shanghai Masters, Arthur Rinderknech, Valentin Vacherot, they were not thoughts in anyone's head in reference to this tournament. But here they are, the main story. I remember I actually posted on Threads that someone is probably writing the script to this movie at the moment. And I mean, they probably are. It's that big of a story. And Chris Eubanks actually replied, and he goes, "No way." He's like, if I had heard of this movie a couple of weeks ago, I would have said, ain't no way that's real. It's not realistic. It's not a real thing. And he's right. If any of us had heard of this story a few weeks ago, it would have been like, no. A qualifier and a player in the mid-50s making it into the finals of a Masters, not happening. But that is exactly what happened. Let me break it down for you. Valentin Vacherot is ranked 204 in the world, and he is the 9th alternate, not even like close. He's the 9th alternate into qualifying. He's not in the qualifying draw. And to back it up even further, the only reason this is even possible at this point is that post 2020, the tours expanded the Masters 1000s events. Before then, it was just Indian Wells and Miami that were 2-week events. After that, more and more Masters events became 12-day, 2-week events. And that meant that the draws became bigger. The draws went from 56 player draws to 96 player draws. And that meant for the qualifying draws, more players could get in with lower rankings. But even then, Vacherot at 204 still couldn't get in. He was the 9th alternate. But he was signed up for challengers in Asia. He'd never been to China before, and he decided to come anyway. BTW, we've covered players who are coming to Asia for their first Asian swing. We covered Ethan Quinn, Haley Baptiste, who's doing her second one, Ellie Spizzeri, who did his first one this year as well, and also won a challenger in China. So I will leave links to, again, their on-tour stories in the description of this episode. But yeah, he decided to give it a shot, show up, see what happens. And he was lucky. Joao Fonseca decided to pull out of Shanghai. So that meant Luca Nardi bumped up. Some other people, I'm sure, bumped up. And that was how Vacherot was able to get into the qualifying draw. He won his first match easily. His second match was tight. But in the end, he gets into the main draw and starts winning matches, At the same time, his cousin, who at the time we didn't even know, I think it wasn't until round of 16 that I think this all started coming out that he was his cousin, is winning matches on his side. But while all of this is happening, I think in the background, Alcaraz had pulled out of Shanghai. Sinner lost to Greek Sport by retiring because he was cramping. So I think a lot of people were thinking, okay, no Sincaraz, who's going to win Shanghai? And, people are saying Zverev, Medvedev, Djokovic, FAA, de Minaur, Rune. No one was thinking Rinderknech, let alone Vacherot. Nobody knew who that guy was. I mean, some people knew who he was. If you remember, he did get to the second round of the Monaco Masters, and that's just how you know that I watch a lot of tennis. But I do remember he got to the second round, and it was a big deal because that just doesn't happen in Monaco. They don't have a lot of players from Monaco. But, no one's thinking about them. But slowly it starts to bubble. Vacherot defeats Greek Sport after he had just beaten Sinner, played really well against Sinner. Then he defeats Rune. On the other side, Rinderknech had already beaten Zverev again because he had beaten him in Wimbledon. He's going through his side of the draw. And then we end up with them in the semifinals, and they have to get through Novak Djokovic and Daniil Medvedev. And at this point, we're like, well, it's been great. We've all had fun here. This is it. It's been nice knowing you cousins. Fun ride is over. That's it. Well, that wasn't it, was it? Vacherot came out and played some excellent tennis against Novak Djokovic. And I really actually do want to talk about this match that Valentin played against Novak Djokovic, because all through this tournament, Novak Djokovic had been on just the tightrope of just physical issues. Now, Shanghai this year, the conditions were really bad. Very humid, very hot. That's why Sinner, had his physical issues. But he kept winning matches. I mean, he twisted his ankle, his back hurt, he was throwing up on court, Novak, and he was still winning matches. And I think the best thing to explain what was happening was after Zizou Berg lost to Novak, he made a comment and he said, Novak, I just need to stop idolizing you. And for me, that just encapsulated everything in my mind that has been happening this year as to why Novak has been winning matches. Because, and you can look back, go watch all his matches. For the most part, even go back as early as the US Open, Novak has just looked like he was about to pass out at every match he has played. Just crawling to the finish line in most of them. And you always look, you're like, how did he win that? And for me, it's aura. That's how he's winning it. He's winning it because of aura. And these players are coming on court, walking on court, having lost the match in the locker room. And Valentin Vacherot didn't do that. For the first time this season, outside of Alcaraz and Sinner. And by the way, even at the Australian Open, Alcaraz does have the tendency of playing the myth and not the man. Valentin Vacherot played the man and not the myth. And you could even tell, like, the moment Valentin won the match and then he goes to the net, he was so effusive of how happy he was to have played Novak at least once in his career and how much he idolized him and he loved him. But he saved that for the net. Before that point in time, he was just playing a guy who had a racket and he was out there to win. And I really loved seeing that. And I just wish more players would do that, because How Novak gets to the semifinals of all of these tournaments, in my humble opinion, at this day and age, is mostly aura. Fight me on it in the comments. But on the other side, Arthur Rinderknech was trying to fight through Medvedev. He lost the first set, and we're all thinking, wow, this might not be as perfect as we thought. Valentin is through, but we're going to have a haphazard, final with Medvedev and Valentin. And even, Rinderknech in the end said, he had kind of lost faith a little bit and was just trying to tire up Medvedev. But I think Medvedev is at this point in his career where he almost shoots himself in the foot a bit. And Rinderknech found his form and was able to play well. But at the same time, Medvedev was shooting himself in the foot, complaining about everything, complaining about the crowd, making noise between first and second serve. And there was always something that he was talking about. And then at the end, he's arguing with Mohamed Lahani, who was the umpire. Medvedev at this point, and maybe even Zverev along the way as well, there's an element of complaining about everything, but actually just focusing on their tennis. But, we have a whole video on this called Lost Boys. We keep talking about it, but it literally is, I've never made a video that has just held up so well and I made that in May or something. So I'll just link it below. Go watch it. It still holds up. But yeah, we got our cousin final, and in the end, Vacherot came out on top. I kind of had a feeling he would. I had watched all of his matches, and he really played some fearless tennis this tournament. And I thought if he could even bring a fraction of that energy to this final, that he had a good chance of winning. He lost the first set, but I think there was definitely nerves there. You're playing your cousin. You're in a Masters 1000 final. So I think there was elements of that there. But then he won in the end. He found that game, and the third set was just across the board. Lights out tennis, just lights out tennis from Valentin. It was the most emotional awards speech thing at the end. But yeah, it was such a joyful, happy final. Nobody lost in that situation. I think, in my opinion, I think tennis just won. And you might be asking, what does this all mean? What does this mean? Is Valentin now? Because here's where we are right now because of the results of this Masters. Rinderknech is now ranked 28 in the world. He was the 7th ranked French player. He's now the 2nd ranked French player under Hugo Humbert, above Arthur Fils. And it now means he's seeded. He's in a seeded position at Grand Slams. That is different for him. It means he's at a better position in draws for Grand Slams. He could have better starts at Grand Slams, and that is very, very important for a player like him. What does it mean for Valentin Vacherot? He was ranked 204 in the world. He was having to play qualies of Grand Slams. In fact, he has never played a main draw of a Grand Slam. Now, he's ranked 40 in the world. He will now be in the main draw of every Grand Slam next year. Because, of course, he'll have all the points till Shanghai of next year. That's massive. That's massive. That's his whole career. That's money he's earning that can take him through a whole entire year. He doesn't have to play qualies anywhere, really. He probably has to play qualies in like other sort of, there are some tournaments he might have to play qualies, but 40 in the world, that's a big deal. it really has changed the trajectory of his career. He has to sort of recalibrate. I think he was supposed to play a whole bunch of challengers that he's now just canceled, and he's heading back home to Monaco to recalibrate, and now wasn't going to play the Paris Masters and might be playing the Paris Masters. He might be able to just get a wild card now to play the Paris Masters. So that's what it means immediately in terms of just like the tennis. Is he now just a top 40 player? Is he going to start playing top 40 tennis when a few weeks ago he wasn't being able to beat, like, if you look at his record, he was losing to people who were 300 in the world. And there's a quote from his coach where I will leave that as well, link in the description. And his coach said, when he was playing in the Challenger circuit and he was favored to win, he almost didn't play the way he played in Shanghai. He just played to put the ball in and wasn't playing the aggressive, good tennis he was playing in Shanghai. And he wasn't winning. When he's forced to play better players, he plays the way he played in Shanghai. He plays better tennis. It's a very interesting thought. And maybe now that he is going to be constantly playing better players, his level will rise and he'll be able to stay at this level for a while. We will see. We will see. But it's been really great. It was really, really, really great week in tennis. Had such an enjoyable weekend watching these semifinals and finals of both tournaments.
Don't raise your voice to prove you're right. Focus your mind with every word of irrefutable fact you can find. Because conviction is the calm that comes when you know that you really do know. People who read the Financial Times know that they can shape their own perspectives with confidence because their viewpoints are informed by genuinely unbiased journalism. Clarity and conviction. Source, FT. Subscribe to the Financial Times at ft.com/sourceft.
This message comes from Ethos. Discover the modern way to get life insurance all online. Protect your family's future against the unexpected in minutes, not months. With Ethos, you could get up to $3 million in coverage without a medical exam. Just answer a few health questions. Some policies are as low as $2 a day. Billed monthly. Get your free quote at ethos.com/audio. That's ETHOS.com/audio. Application times may vary. Rates may vary.
What's coming up next week? What is coming up next week or this week? Because I am actually recording this on Monday. It's coming out today. The Asian Swing is wrapping up with the WTA. They still have 2 weeks of tournament. Right now, the WTA is in Osaka, in Japan, for WTA 250. Naomi Osaka is there actually playing her home tournament, and also Hailey Baptiste is there among with others. And then in Ningbo, that is in China, there's a 500 level event happening there where we have players like Diana Schneider, Belinda Bencic, Zainab Somneb is also playing there, McCarthy Kessler as well. On the ATP side, we are moving indoors. We are back in Europe, back in my favorite time zone. They are 2 tournaments happening, 2 250 events, one in Stockholm and one in Brussels. In Brussels, Elliot Spizzirri just made it through qualifying. So he just beat Alex Block, who's a really great player, and he is into the main draw. Just looking to see who else. Yes, we've got Yannick Hanfmann, who also made it through. We have Zizou Bergs, who's playing in Brussels. We have Joao Fonseca is back on tour, playing in Brussels. Giovanni Mpeshe Pericard is in Brussels. So that is what's happening in Brussels. In Stockholm, which is one of my favorite courts, they have these wooden seats that I really, really love. It's just a cool looking court. We have Jacob Fernley participating. Sebastian Korda is back as well. Marin Cilic, Mark Lehal, Matteo Berrettini is back in Stockholm. So we have a few players definitely in there in the mix. And there are also 2 expos happening as well. We've got UTS, which is happening in Hong Kong. Coleman Wong is playing. Triple Z is playing there as well. Andrei Rublev. I don't know much about UTS. It's definitely one of those things that we're adding to our what to do in the off season. We keep adding to the list of off-season stuff to do. The off-season is so short. So we'll probably just do it sometime during the season. So that's happening as well in Hong Kong. I think that starts on the 14th, so maybe tomorrow actually. And then we have Six King Slam, the Six King Slam. Six King Slam is an exo that happens in Saudi Arabia. It happened for the first time last year. If you remember, they had that crazy trailer that was Hollywood style, VisFX, probably spent millions on it. And the prize money is a lot of money. $6 million. I think it's 6.5 actually. It's a lot of money. It is a lot of money that they're spending on these Saudi Arabian expos. But it's actually very interesting. It's all based on Grand Slams. So, for example, Jannik Sinner won the tournament last year, but the 6 kings are Novak Djokovic, Carlos Alcaraz, Jannik Sinner, Alexander Zverev, Taylor Fritz, and Stefanos Tsitsipas, who is replacing Jack Draper. So the whole idea was it was the first 6 players by ranking, but Jack Draper shut down his season due to injury, so Stefanos Tsitsipas was replaced him. And the 2 players got buys, Novak Djokovic and Carlos Alcaraz. And you might be wondering, well, why didn't Jannik Sinner get a buy since he won last year? The buys are given based on how many Grand Slams you have. So the most Grand Slams get a buy in the first round. Fascinating tournament. By the way, it's airing on Netflix. So the 6 King Slam, you're going to be able to watch on Netflix. Everything else I mentioned, the WTA event, ATP events, and also UTS, you can watch on the Tennis Channel in the US. And in the UK, it's going to be on Sky Sports. In fact, I have to check with UTS. I think UTS is also on Sky Sports, but I'll have to double check that, and I'll probably just leave that in the description so you can check it out there. But this has been a not so mini pod because we're almost at an hour. But yeah, we're not at an hour. It's probably like 45 minutes. But it was a super weekend. Lots to catch up on and lots to talk about. I hope you have enjoyed this mini pod. Again, thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe if you are watching this on YouTube. In the comments, let me know which of these 2 finals was your favorite of the weekend. And then if you're listening to this on a podcast player of your choice, same thing. Drop us a note in the comments and let us know which final was your favorite and why, and leave us a review, hopefully a 5-star rating if you have enjoyed this episode. And we will see you again for a full episode next week. Bye, guys.
Take control of the numbers and supercharge your small business with Xero. That's Xero. With our easy-to-use accounting software with automation and reporting features, you'll spend less time on manual tasks and more time understanding how your business is doing. 87% of surveyed U.S. customers agree Xero helps improve financial visibility. Search Xero with an X or visit Xero.com/ACAST to start your 30-day free trial. Conditions apply.
Don't raise your voice to prove you're right. Focus your mind with every word of irrefutable fact you can find. Because conviction is the calm that comes when you know that you really do know. People who read the Financial Times know that they can shape their own perspectives with confidence because their viewpoints are informed by genuinely unbiased journalism. Clarity and conviction. Source, FT. Subscribe to the Financial Times at ft.com/sourceft.